I'm your instructor, Gail Bell, and I wanted to walk you through this first writing assignment, other than the email assignment that you've had to this point. This is going to be a personal narrative blog, and if you're familiar at all with blogs, you know that the term actually comes from weblog, so it's been shortened. It's called a clipped form of a word because you take one letter and you kind of it's a mashup between two words. So blogs are increasingly popular. Initially, they started out as sort of online journals that people kept, but now they are multi-million-dollar businesses. Literally, people will advertise on popular blogs, and there are those who make money and make a living. They're all types, having to do with science, technology, business, or just personal human interest type blogs. And so what I'm asking you to do is, instead of writing like a formal essay, this blog will be somewhat like a journal, but it's going to be an organized journal. And I'm asking you for it to be a narrative. Now, a narrative, by definition, narrates or tells a story. There are objective narratives. For example, if you go to visit a doctor and he or she writes up, my doctor does this, actually records what happens in our visit, and then will type it up later in a narrative form, almost like not exactly a story, but it tells a sequence of events. If you're in a car accident, the police man or woman will also have to type up a series of events that explains your side of the account, what happened in the accident, if you're in an accident with somebody else, what they said. And that's called a narrative, okay? It's providing a sequence of events, usually in chronological order, which means in time frame, it's the order in which they happened. What I'm asking you to do, this is a personal narrative, so it's subjective. You should write from your own personal experiences. You should use first person I, and tell a story about your life, a true story. And I got you started on this assignment last week, actually, with the pre-writing techniques that I asked you to do concerning some significant first in your life. You know, I asked you to do a free write and then also to answer the questions who, what, when, where, why, and I think how was the last one. By the way, that particular technique is called the writer's formula. If you ever wanted to write for a newspaper, for example, in journalism school, one of the first things they teach you is that you answer as many of those questions as applies to your story in the first 1 to 2 paragraphs. Seriously, read any newspaper article that's sort of strictly news. It will answer those 5 questions in the first paragraph or 2. You know, who did it, when they did it, what they did, where it happened, and oftentimes how, and certainly when. My recommendation, by the way, is anytime that you are writing an essay for a college class, or a report or a research paper, you should normally answer those 5 to 6 questions somewhere in the first paragraph or 2, whichever ones seem appropriate for your particular subject. So anyway, the point of pre-writing is to help you use more extensively the right side of your brain according to the brain theory, and you all did that assessment for me the first week of class. And so the point of that is to get you to think, to use one side of your brain that's a bit more creative, a bit more associative. Those of you who are scored left brain, that you had left brain tendencies or are particularly left brain, often want to skip this part, but you're often the people who need it the most, because left brain writers often have trouble coming up with things to say or coming up with enough to say. That's usually never a right brain person's problem. So those activities were to get you started and to get you thinking about this particular topic. So you can write about, and many of you did, a lot of times my students will choose to write about if they've had children, the birth of their first child. You can write about a first date, a first car accident, sadly, a first major illness, your first apartment, first kiss, first pet. There's so many possibilities, and kind of the goal of this assignment, the purpose for it, is for you to relate a little something about yourself. And the audience for this assignment should be your other people taking this course, in addition to me. Obviously, I have to assess it. I have to give a grade, but the purpose of the assignment is for you all to kind of get to know each other a little bit better through telling this story. So if you look on the screen at these guidelines, I'm going to walk you through them, and there's a copy of it in this folder. This is a 50-point assignment, so it's not going to take you as long. It's not going to require as much effort as, say, a test, which is worth 100 points, or a formal writing assignment, a more formal writing assignment, in which we go through several steps, including pre-writing and drafting and getting feedback. Your next paper for me will be a more formal paper, and it'll be worth 100 points. Okay, but for purposes of this assignment, we're focusing on a couple of things. So if you'll take a look, it should be roughly 350 to 500 words. Now, the easiest way to determine word count is to actually type it first in Microsoft Word. And if you'll look in the bottom left-hand corner in Microsoft Word, it keeps a running total of your word count. Now, the reason that I specify numbers of words, it's not because I want you to sit there and have to count them by any stretch or put that kind of effort into it. But what it does is signal to you, the writer, the target of how much you should write, how broad or narrow your thesis should be, how much detail is required, how broad your focus should be. So this is a fairly short write, which means you need to, I've had some students who kind of made the mistake of, when they write about their first child, they try and cover 18 years of life if the kid is, is that old. And instead, you could do that in a book, right? Most of us who have children could write books about our kids. So instead, what I want you to do is to focus on one specific event and then make that event come to life with detail and example. Okay, that's really one of the goals. So that's number 2. It should contain a thesis. A thesis is the main point that you want to make about what you write. So please notice the difference between, and you've got a reading assignment this week about thesis statements. So please read that before you write your blog. But the main difference between a subject, like birth of my first child is a subject, and a thesis, the birth of my first child literally changed my life and my way of viewing what is important. That's a thesis statement, because notice it's a combination of your subject and what you want to say about your subject. Okay, so and normally if you look at that shaping an essay, the paragraphing PowerPoint that's also in this week's folder, which you should review before you begin to write. The point of an introduction is to kind of ease you into the story, and a thesis statement should normally be the last sentence in your introduction. It signals to the reader, and this is what this paper is going to be about, although you shouldn't use those words. Okay. The number 3, of course, concerns a first and focuses pretty specifically on some aspect of that first. But you want to kind of build suspense as you tell your story. For example, if you're talking about your first wreck, you want to kind of set things up and then build into what happens. If you think about, if you've ever studied in the literature class, the sequence of events in a plot, normally it builds, right, till you hit the climax, and then you get into falling action and so forth. Well, part of the point of your story should build. Okay. Number 4, hopefully you've already completed those pre-writing activities and received grades for those. I try and get those back to you very quickly. Once again, it should be written from first person, personal perspective. It's your story. Number 7, again, it tells events in chronological order. Number 8, keep in mind that your audience is not just me, because obviously I'm going to be your audience for everything you write and do this semester, but it's for other people to read. So try and keep in mind what they might want to know, and that's why detail and example is so important in writing. It's because you the writer knows what happens. You know what happens, not knows. You know what happened, and you can picture it. You can see it. You want that to come to life for those of us as we read. Okay, so that's where detail and example comes in. Don't just tell, but show. And then finally, follow the conventions of grammatically accurate, and that should be prose, left off the word there. And then to receive full credit, I need for you to respond to the posts of 2 other students, which means that you need to read. I would read more than 2. Feel free to respond to more than 2, but to receive full credit for this assignment, you should read and what other people have written in the class and then make comment about it. And normally the types of comments, because this is a personal post, feel free to say anything that you personally connected to. That's normally if you read a blog post online, and some of you may follow different blogs. If you read a blog post online, when people tend to comment, they comment because they have a response. There's something that they read that provoked a response in them. Normally it's something with which we too identify, or even if we don't identify, perhaps the writer made something come to life so vividly that that would be something you could remark upon. Okay, so if you'll continue to look at the screen, I want to show you how to upload your blog or to type your blog. In this folder, if you select Personal Narrative Blog, you'll notice here in the left-hand corner it says Create Blog Entry. Okay, and here are the instructions. Type or copy and paste your blog here. Then read and respond to the blogs of 2 other posts. So to create a blog, you simply select Create Blog Entry. Give it a title. My first accident. And then you can type your blog entry here. Or you have the option of, if you typed it first in Microsoft Word processing, copy what you type and then just paste it into this area. If you're not quite sure how to do that, let me pull up this again. Highlight anything that you want to copy. Okay, and then you can either right click here with using your mouse and select copy. Oh, I selected cut, that was wrong. Let me try that again. Select copy, okay? Or you can also use what's a control and the letter C on your keyboard, and that will copy whatever you've highlighted. Okay, then when you click in the area and see the cursor where you're supposed to paste, and Control V, the letter V, will then paste the information there. Okay, now once you've done that, the next step is to, or you can actually, if you want to save it as a Word document, you'll notice in this area you can actually attach it as a file rather than copy it in this space. Now here's the important part. You need to select green here in the bottom corner to post the entry. Otherwise it will not show up. Okay. If you want to save the entry as a draft and then come back and work on it some more, you may do that as well. But I'm going to post the entry. Okay, now notice on the left-hand side here under the index, it shows up. What will happen is more students post their blogs. If you want to comment on that blog, to read and respond to it, you simply select the title. It'll open up, and then here in the right-hand corner, select comment. Type whatever it is that you want to say. This is really interesting, blah, blah, blah. And then select add. Okay? And so notice what happens is your comment is folded up, but it shows up here as a 1. All right? So there's one comment on this blog. And once again, to receive full credit for this assignment, you need to not only post your own blog, but you need to read the posts of at least 2 other students. Okay? Please let me know if you have any questions by calling or emailing me. And again, I request that you use Blackboard email simply because I have several different courses with online components. And what happens is if a student emails me, especially from their own personal email account, but even from their MyGNTC account, it doesn't identify to which course he or she belongs. And the problem with that is because I have several sections, until I immediately kind of connect a student with a course,